Hi guys, welcome to lesson 5. This is our last lesson in this unit, and we are going to talk about different types of inequalities, so just like weird things that are going on. So the first one I want to look at is this, and we are going to solve and graph it. So when I say graph, that's going to be on a number line. When I say solve, that's going to be like the interval notation. So just kind of keep those two things in mind when we go through this. So the first thing that you're going to do is set these so they're less than or greater than 0. So we're going to move that 6 over, and then we will factor if we can. So this one we can factor. Oops. Nope, wrong one. Let's try that again. Okay, so I have x minus 6 times x plus 1 is greater than or equal to 0. So we're going to find what would make it equal to 0. So this part right here. So when x equals 6 and x equals -1. So what that's going to do is these are going to give us our boundaries. So I'm going to mark down -1 and 6. And because it's equal to, I'm going to put a dot there. And so we have a few different options. Like it could go this way, it could like connect the two, it could go this way. Like we don't know what's going on. So we have to use some test points and kind of try it out. So do you see how there's like 3 different sections? So there's a section here, there's a section here, and there's a section here. So I need a test point for each of those sections. So for that first section, I'm just going to choose like -2. It can be -100 if you wanted to, just as long as it's less than -1. Between -1 and 6, I always like to use 0. It's just easier. And greater than 6, I'm going to use 7. So you can type it or you can plug these values in anywhere. Here's a little trick. So if you plug it in here, this part just has to be positive. So let me show you the mindset there. So let's try -2. So I'm just going to write this out on top. So -2, oops, minus 6. And then I have -2 plus 1. Okay, we want this to be greater than or equal to 0. So we want this to be positive. So this is what I think about. I don't really think about the number itself. I just think about, okay, this is going to be negative, in this case, -8. This is going to be negative, -1. A negative times a negative, that is going to be a positive. So it is greater than or equal to 0. So if you don't like that idea, that is totally okay. You can just plug in -2 squared minus 5 times -2 minus 6 and see if that is greater than or equal to 0. Like if that's your comfort level, that's fine. You can even go back to the original equation or inequality and plug it in there. It doesn't matter. I feel like this is a shortcut, but if you don't get it, then it's not a shortcut for you. So that's totally okay. Okay, so when I plugged this in, it was a positive, so that made this true. So I'm going to put a little yes there. Okay, so let's try 0. So go ahead and try it and see what you get. So I squeeze my work in down here. So I have a negative times a positive, which is a negative. So I'm going to put a no because that is not greater than 0. Okay, and for this last one, go ahead and try 7, plug 7 in. And so when I did that, I got a positive times a positive, which is definitely a positive. So I got yes. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to figure out, this kind of helps guide our sections. So anywhere, oh goodness gracious. Anywhere this side is going to be good, right here. So that was all true. So I'm going to have an arrow going that way. Nothing was going on in here, but this side was all true. So I'm going to have an arrow going this way. So this section was true and this section was true. So my answer is going to be negative infinity to -1 bracket, because it was a closed dot, and then I'm going to have bracket 6. We're going to connect it with the union, bracket 6 to positive infinity. So it looks like that. So again, this right here, ooh, that's a highlighter, that's beautiful. This is my answer for the solving, and this nastiness is my answer for the graphing. So that's what your teacher is going to be looking for on the test, or what I'm going to be looking for on the test. So this one, I'm going to take and I'm going to move these over here. So it's going to be like 0 is greater than x squared minus 2x minus 3. So go ahead and factor that and see how far you can take it. Okay, so I went through here and I learned that my boundaries are 3 and -1. And so because there's no equal sign here, that's why I made these an open circle, but I did for my boundaries. So the next thing I'm going to do is pick my different points. So I have, let's see, I'm going to choose -2 and 0 and 4. So what I want you to do is plug these points in anywhere, and I want you to decide, does it make it true? I'm going to put a yes, and if it does not make it true, I'm going to put a no. So go ahead and try. Okay, so I showed my work up here, and I have a, I just use like my negative and positive trick. So the thing is I want this one actually to be negative. Like that's my goal, because I want it to be less than 0. So these two right here were positive, so it's not going to work. So the only thing that worked is that section between -1 and 3. So I want that section, so it's going to look like that. So my answer is going to be parentheses -1 to 3 parentheses. Okay, so we are going to do the same thing on this one. Go ahead and try it and see what you get. And don't let this 2 scare you, the squared. It's still like our boundaries are still going to be x equals 3 and x equals -2. Okay, so here's what I have so far. I have my boundaries at -2 and 3, and so I plugged in 3 test points, 1 for each section, to kind of see what I wanted. And so I need to look up here. I want it to be a negative. So this was the only case that it was a negative. So it's going to be going this way. But I just can't say negative infinity to 2, because I also have this 3 out here. So I'm just going to connect it with the union and just place the point of 3 there. So that's my answer there. Okay, we have 2 more. So when you have fractions like this, what you're going to do is we want a 0 on top and a 0 on bottom, but we're going to treat the 0 on bottom differently than we would the 0 on top, because you can't have a 0 on bottom. So the way I'm going to look at this is -2 here, and actually -2 here, so it's just -2, is going to be an open dot. So anytime you have that denominator, you want to set it equal to 0, but it's going to be an open dot because it's going to go right up to it. So the only other thing that I have is right here, and that is going to be a 0, and it's going to be a closed dot. Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to erase all this, and let's kind of do what we did first and set it equal to 0. So don't let the fractions freak you out. I'm just going to move this fraction over like that. And then notice they have the same denominator. Okay, so now that's going to change that top part. So we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so I have on the bottom, just like we said, I'm going to have an open dot at x equals -2. So that's one of my boundaries. And then my top boundary is going to be a closed dot, oops, at 1, x equals 1. Okay, so that's where I'm starting. So those are my 2 boundaries. So -2, open dot, 1, close dot. Okay, so I have 3 sections, so I'm going to make 3 test points. Okay, so go ahead and try those test points and see what you get. Okay, so let's look. I want this to be positive. So it works here, it doesn't work here, and it works here. So it's going to be this way. There's nothing here, and it's going to be this way. So my final answer is -infinity to -2 parentheses right there, and then union bracket 1 to infinity. Okay, one more. So we have this. This is kind of just a step more difficult than this. So I think what I want to do first is move this over and set it equal to 0, and then we're going to factor. So see if you can try those 2 things. Okay, so I'm left with this, and I can't, like we did up here, we had the common denominator, we don't down here. So I'm going to have to multiply everything by the common denominator I want, which is that. And when I multiply everything through by x minus 1, x plus 1, these will cancel out, and I'm just left with x minus 1 here. Okay, so I want to stop here and just kind of talk about a couple things. So first of all, I'm subtracting this whole thing. So I'm subtracting 5x minus 5, which is going to give me x squared plus 1 minus 5x plus 5. So just kind of be careful of that. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and clean this up and then factor it if I can. So I have x squared minus 5x plus 6 over the same thing is greater than or equal to 0. So I can factor that. So I'm going to get x minus 2, x minus 3 over x minus 1, x plus 1. Like that. Okay, so if you'll notice, I have 4 types of boundaries. So these are both going to be open dot at 1 and -1. These are going to be closed dot at 2 and 3. So let's go ahead and set this up. Okay, so we have -1, 1, 2, and 3. So open dot, closed dot, closed dot. So the next thing I'm going to do is just pick my points. That's going to be kind of yucky. That's okay. And we'll just go through and substitute it in and see what happens. Okay, so make sure I put that there after I push pause, I think. Okay, so I did all these. I plugged them in, and I found that this was yes, no, yes, no, yes. Okay, so let's do the arrows. So I need an arrow going this way. Nothing's going on there. This section was a yes, so I'm going to do that. There's nothing going on there, and I have this section. So my final answer, I'm going to put this on the bottom, is going to be -infinity to -1 parentheses right there. And then I have right here parentheses 1 bracket 2. And then I have bracket 3 to +infinity. So that is my final answer. And we are done.